Do not repeat the tactics that have gained you one victory, but let your methods be regulated by the infinite variety of circumstances. Sun Tzu, The Art of War. Hey everyone, this is Bad Boogle, and on this channel, we discuss different ideas in psychology and philosophy that can help us improve in Rocket League. Here, in this video, we're going to be taking an in-depth look at imagery, and the driving motivation behind it is to give everyone a tool that will allow them to practice better. My hope is that this tool will help serious Rocket League players in a way that allows them to really see the benefits of imagery. Of course, we don't want to leave everyone on the edge of their seats, so I'll give a quick overview of what the drill is before we get into the details. Simply put, it's map memorization. The practice is a type of visual and spatial memorization and reconstruction. Specifically, the drill is about memorizing three-dimensional landscapes using Google Maps to exercise a part of the brain that is absolutely critical to practicing various forms of imagery. I've talked about imagery and its benefits on this channel before, but I don't feel like I've covered it very well. As those that have tried will probably testify, it's really hard to hold stuff in your mind's eye. It's just not that easy to construct these visual images and then manipulate them in your head. And it gets especially difficult when you're trying to simultaneously imagine holding a controller and doing the actions that would lead to whatever the changes are that you're imagining. The brain is an incredibly complex system, and we need all the parts working properly and together. Long story short, it can be really hard to imagine doing mechanical movements in Rocket League with any bit of accuracy. So, to see how practicing map memorization can help us get better at imagery, we need to understand a little bit of the neuroscience going on in the background. The main subject of interest is a little part of your brain called the hippocampus. And this means our first important lesson is to keep in mind that the brain is not just a bunch of undifferentiated brain stuff. The brain is a balance of rigid pre-programming and flexible learning. So some parts of your brain are specialists at certain tasks, others are jacks of all trades, and some are almost simple input-output machines. The main part we're concerned with, the hippocampus, happens to be a specialist in memory. Of course, those that have studied brain science will be quick to point out that there is no part of the brain that just does something. There are only parts of the brain that are critical to doing certain things. We know that if you take these parts out, certain mental abilities will just stop working or be severely impaired. Now, with that in mind, we know that the hippocampus is crucial in all sorts of memory, but especially visual memory. As I understand it, the hippocampus is not where memories are stored, but rather it's the bridge between perception and storage. Quite literally, it sits in the brain as a bridge between the temporal and occipital lobes, and as it gets stronger, the ability to store complex visual information gets better. Before we get into the positive aspects of growing the hippocampus through practice, it's important to note that it can also shrink with age or stress-related disorders like anxiety, depression, and PTSD. This shrinking often results in worse episodic or autobiographical memory, and these are essentially two ways to say the same thing. It's a type of memory that is intimately connected with doing imagery, and it involves seeing stuff through a sort of experiential perspective. The only difference is that autobiographical or episodic memory is involved in recalling and reconstructing actual memories rather than fabricating new ones, as would be the case in imagery. And as we would expect, when the hippocampus starts to deteriorate, so does the ability to store and recall these types of visual memories of having experienced something. And this means, as an interesting side note, that we can exercise the brain in a way that might actually help us prevent some of the side effects of some of the worst things that are plaguing us as human beings. Moving along to the good stuff, growth of the hippocampus is tied to more efficient and effective processing and storing of visual information. There's always debate around subjects like this, but we're going to ignore that in this video. In my opinion, there's plenty of reason to believe that this is exactly what it means when we say the brain is shaped by experience. The most convincing studies on this have to do with the London taxicab drivers. These guys memorize a ton of stuff, so naturally they're a target for brain research. And as it turns out, the better and more experienced these cab drivers get, the larger their hippocampus gets. And it's not a perfect correlation, but it's obvious that the hippocampus is a key part to understanding, recalling, or manipulating visual and spatial information. Their task is a little different than imagery, but it's essentially the same in that they're just trying to imagine how to get from state A to state B. The cab schools have their students memorize street names, then the different landmarks of areas, and then they have them go out and actually survey these areas. We're going to do things a little differently, and all you're going to need is Google Maps or something like it. If you live in a city, the first step is to find your area on the map. If you don't live in a city, it might be easier just to locate the nearest one, and then start from City Hall. For the purposes of this video, that's what I'm going to be doing. So, here's City Hall in Minneapolis, and the next step is to use satellite imagery and the 3D option to look around the area. First, take in the shape of City Hall, the streets around it, and try to keep that in your head. Next, use Street View and walk around the area, stopping once in a while to pan around and just see how things look. When you're comfortable, pan back out and get used to the different view. I should mention, it's probably a good idea to commit the street names to mind as well, but don't worry about them too much. Also, on that note, it will help to switch back and forth between satellite imagery and normal maps. Stay in satellite for most of the time, but take breaks to see how the different maps overlay each other. The next part of the strategy is to consider each point like this as a node, and then to connect the nodes together. Important or big things make the best starting nodes, and that's why we've started with City Hall. This strange-looking park over here, shaped like a teardrop, is going to be the next node. So, when I say to connect the nodes, I mean you should think about how big these things are in relation to each other and how far away they are from each other. You don't need to memorize all the little things between them. That will probably come later. So, for this teardrop-shaped park, I'm going to do the same stuff I did with City Hall. I'll get a feel for how it looks, how big it is compared to City Hall, and the stuff around it, as well as see how far these two nodes are from each other. Then I'll go back to Street View and I'll have a look around, and I'll try to find things that stick out. Eventually, these big nodes are going to help us form a sort of scaffolding for smaller, medium-sized nodes. They'll help form a framework that will support learning new nodes, and then these, in turn, will help build the framework. Eventually, the goal is to weave a tight fabric of ideas that lets you think more concretely about space and time. Now, that's a pretty bold claim, but I think you get the point. The whole thing is really an exercise in building networks, images, and perspectives in your head. Of course, I should mention that if you're afraid of running out of space, no one has found a real limit to it yet, and it doesn't look likely that anyone will. The bottom line, there is a part of your brain that we know how to grow, and it's a critical junction in visual information processing, something that is very important to growing your Rocket League skills. In addition to that, visual information processing is also something important to using imagery and getting better at it. Those two things being said, you can see why I'm recommending this as a form of practice. Now that we're done with the main part of the video, I want to talk about some exciting news in the world of Bad Boogle. I know I haven't been uploading very much, and I'm sorry for that, but we've been working on a lot of different things. First up, I've started co-coaching with Josh over at 72 Pin Connector, and the main lineup is DD, BP67, and Lion Blaze. So these guys are the real deal. I'm really looking forward to working with them. The other major news is that my girlfriend Kang has started playing Rocket League, and we're using her experience as a way to reboot the curriculum. Working together with Josh, we're coming up with drills to see how we can make her the best player as fast as possible, and we're going to be doing our best to document the whole process. Alright everyone, thanks for watching, and please subscribe if that's something you'd like to do, or like the video, or don't do any of that at all. Or we've also got a Patreon up. That would be cool if you showed your support that way. You can find me on Twitch, Discord, probably Twitter too, but I don't really do anything on there. Anyways, thanks for watching.